This video will show you a little bit more advanced coding with the Arduino and actually using an analog controller to do some different things. To start off with, we're going to set up our breadboard and our Arduino as we did before. We're going to go ahead and connect our 5-volt to our positive, make that red. Our ground to our negative, make that black. And we're going to wire up an LED again. So for now, we're just going to close off our ground loop with a resistor, and we'll make it, well, let's leave it red. Why not? Let's live a little, okay? We also want to set up our output, and we're just going to use our digital 1 again, as we did in the previous video, if you watched that, and we're going to leave that green so that we know that it's controlling some information that's coming out of the Arduino. We're also going to use a potentiometer. So I'm going to drag that over and plug it in here. And we're going to use our 3 terminals. So we're going to connect our terminal 1 to our positive and our terminal 2 to our negative. Make that black so we can see that clearly. Ooh, that was not black. Okay, and then for our wiper, our middle terminal, we're going to connect that, and we're actually going to use the analog in. Since this is an analog device, let's just go with A1. It's my favorite steak sauce too. We'll leave that green, and that's pretty much all the wiring we have to do. Now we can jump into doing some of the coding. Oh, get rid of these blocks. Okay. We're going to start now with, actually, since we have a sensor, we're going to start with that first section that we did not use in the other video. We're going to set up an integer, int, and use the sensor value command, if I can spell it correctly. And we're going to start with that sensor value at 0 to make sure that we kind of start at a baseline. We don't want it to be starting at a wrong setup. Okay. Speaking of setups, let's move on to our setup. And we have our parentheses, of course. We open our bracket. Okay. We have our 2 pin modes, and our first one, let's make that our input. So we have pin mode, open parenthesis, and we're going to use A1, comma, and that's going to be our input. Close parenthesis and semicolon, and then we also have our output for our LED, which is digital 1. Again, we don't have to do anything with a D or anything on that one, just leave it as 1. That's our output. Close parenthesis, semicolon, and close your bracket. Okay, now we move on to our loop section. Okay, now we want to read the sensor, or read what the position of that potentiometer is. When we do that, the Arduino is going to convert it into a digital number based on its position, and that number is going to be up to 1024. Okay, so that's going to convert the signal from the potentiometer into a number, and we can use that to do some different things. Okay, so first of all, we have to tell it to read the sensor value. So we're using our variable sensor value, and we're going to do that, to use that, we're going to go with analog read, and we're just going to analog read A1, close parenthesis, semicolon. Okay, so now the Arduino is going to read whatever position our potentiometer is in. Okay, now we can do something with that. Okay, and to use it, we're going to actually use some if statements. Okay, so we can do if. Once we have a command, we're going to open up our parenthesis there. Okay, and if our sensor value, and what do we want to do here? Well, we've got 1024, so half of that would be 512. So let's say this: if the sensor value is less than 512, okay, And that's it. That's our if statement. Next, we're going to tell the Arduino to do something. How do we do that? We open another fancy bracket. Okay, so if the sensor value is less than 512, we're going to actually make sure that our LED is in a low state. We'll make that like the off position. So digital write, parenthesis, and remember on port number 1, and it's going to be low. We're going to close that off with a semicolon again. But now we want to say, actually that's all we want to do. If it's less than 512, we've got it in a low state. So now we close that out, and then we do another if statement. If the sensor value is greater than 512 up to 1024, then we're going to write that pin to a high power state. Close our bracket, close our parenthesis, add a semicolon, close our bracket. Okay, so we've got two things going on here. It's checking if it's in a position that's below 512 or basically below halfway up, it's going to keep the LED off, and that's this command. And then if it's above 512, if it's in that section, it's going to turn the LED on, and that closes off. The last thing we have to do is we have to close the whole loop off by adding in our final bracket. Okay, it's kind of nice to do it this way. We can see an open, close, open, close, open, close. Okay, so let's start our simulation and see what happens. Okay, so right now our potentiometer is all the way up and our LED is on. If we drag it about halfway, we can see that it's going to turn off. In this low section, go over half, on, off, on, off. Okay.